When Marcus opened his eyes that Sunday morning, the first thing he noticed wasn't the unfamiliar ceiling or the soft lavender scent of the pillows. It was the warmth of a body pressed against his back, an arm draped casually over his waist, and the gentle rhythm of breathing that definitely wasn't his own. His heart stopped. Then it started racing so fast he thought it might explode right out of his chest. He slowly, carefully, turned his head to the left, and there she was. Elena. His neighbor. His 45-year-old, incredibly beautiful, completely off-limits neighbor. She was wearing his shirt. His blue button-down shirt that he distinctly remembered putting on yesterday evening. Her long silky hair was spread across the pillow like a dark waterfall, and her perfect figure was barely concealed by the thin fabric. And then she opened one eye, smiled that devastating smile of hers, and whispered in a voice still thick with sleep, "Good morning, wild man. You were absolutely incredible last night." Marcus had absolutely no memory of how he got here. None. Zero. The last thing he remembered was sitting at his kitchen table, staring at a single glass of whiskey, and crying over his daughter's college acceptance letter. Now stay with me, because what happened in the 24 hours before this moment, and what would happen in the days that followed, would change everything Marcus thought he knew about love, loss, second chances, and the terrifying beauty of letting someone see the real you. But first, let me take you back 3 months earlier to the moment when everything started falling apart and somehow, impossibly, falling into place. Marcus Rivera was 35 years old, a single father for the past 6 years, and according to his teenage daughter Sophie, the most embarrassingly dad-like dad in the entire Pacific Northwest. He was strikingly handsome in a way that made strangers do double takes on the street, with chiseled features, a jawline that could cut glass, and eyes so deep brown they looked almost black in certain lighting. His fair skin was flawless, and he had the kind of aesthetic build that came from dedicated gym sessions and a genuine love of staying active. At 35, he was in the prime of his life physically, turning heads wherever he went, though he seemed genuinely oblivious to the effect he had on people. His dark hair was always perfectly styled in that effortless way that actually took 15 minutes every morning, though he would never admit it. He was charismatic in that effortless way that made people lean in when he spoke, and he wielded his sharp, witty sense of humor like a Swiss Army knife, using it to charm strangers, defuse awkward situations, and most importantly, to keep anyone from getting too close to the parts of himself that still hurt. The cruel irony of Marcus Rivera was that he looked like a man who had everything figured out. Handsome, successful, charming, young. But underneath that perfect exterior was a heart so scarred that he had convinced himself it would never fully heal. Elena Thornton moved into the house next door on a rainy Tuesday in March. Marcus watched from his kitchen window as she directed the movers with the confidence of a general commanding troops, her long dark hair somehow managing to look elegant even in the drizzle. She was 10 years older than him, 45 to his 35, and she carried herself with the kind of quiet confidence that only comes from surviving things that would break most people. She caught him staring, and instead of looking away like a normal person, Marcus raised his coffee mug in a salute. She laughed and waved back. That laugh. It did something to his chest that he immediately decided to ignore. Over the following weeks, their interactions were brief but charged with something neither of them acknowledged. She would be checking her mail when he left for work. He would be mowing his lawn when she came back from her morning yoga. They traded hellos that lasted a little too long, smiles that meant a little too much, and once, when their fingers touched as he handed her a package that had been delivered to his address by mistake, neither of them pulled away for a full 3 seconds. 3 very long, very confusing seconds. "You should ask her out," Sophie said one evening, not looking up from her phone. Marcus nearly choked on his pasta. "What? Who? What are you talking about?" "The hot neighbor lady. Elena. You stare at her like she's the last pizza slice at a party." "I do not stare. I glance. Neighborly glances. That's what neighbors do." Sophie finally looked up, giving him the withering look that only a 17-year-old girl can truly master. Dad, I love you, but you're pathetic. It's been 6 years since Mom left. You're allowed to like someone. Marcus put down his fork, his appetite suddenly gone. Sophie, it's complicated. It's really not. But it was. It was so complicated. Because Marcus hadn't just been abandoned by his wife, he had been destroyed by her. Rebecca had left on Sophie's 11th birthday, while the cake was still in the oven, while the streamers were still being hung. He had been only 29 years old, barely into his 30s, when his entire world collapsed. She had looked at Marcus and told him that she had never really loved him, that Sophie had been a mistake she'd spent 11 years trying to outrun, and that she had found someone who actually made her feel alive. The someone was Marcus's best friend since college. They moved to Costa Rica. They sent exactly one postcard, which Marcus burned in the backyard while Sophie watched from her bedroom window. The next 6 years were a blur of therapy appointments, school plays, soccer games, burned dinners, tear-filled nights, and slowly, painfully, building something that looked like a normal life. Marcus had gone from a 29-year-old newlywed who thought he had forever figured out to a 35-year-old single father who trusted no one with his heart. He became both mother and father. He learned to braid hair. He learned which brand of pads Sophie preferred. He learned how to talk about boys and broken hearts and the terror of growing up. He learned that sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is cry in the shower so his daughter doesn't hear him fall apart. But he never learned how to let anyone in again. How could he? Rebecca had seen every part of him, and she had decided it wasn't enough. She had looked at his love, his devotion, his very soul, and she had shrugged and walked away. How do you recover from that? How do you trust anyone with your heart when you know exactly how easy it is for someone to crush it? So Marcus kept everyone at arm's length. He dated occasionally, mostly to appease Sophie and his sister who kept setting him up with her coworkers. Women were drawn to him constantly, captivated by his handsome face and magnetic personality, but he never let anyone pass the first few layers. He was funny and charming and attentive, and then, right when things might get real, he would make a joke that was just cutting enough to create distance, say something that was just dismissive enough to push them away. It was a defense mechanism so ingrained that he barely noticed he was doing it anymore. And then Elena Thornton moved in next door, with her long silky hair and her perfect figure and her laugh that sounded like the first warm day after a long winter. And Marcus felt the walls he had spent 6 years building start to crack. The first time they really talked was in June, exactly 2 weeks after Sophie got her college acceptance letter to Stanford. She wanted to be a biomedical engineer. She wanted to change the world. She wanted to move 1,043 miles away from the only person who had never left her. Marcus was proud. He was so incredibly proud. And he was also falling apart in ways he couldn't explain or control. Elena found him sitting on his front porch at 11 o'clock at night, staring at nothing, an empty beer bottle beside him. "Rough night?" she asked, appearing from the shadows like some kind of beautiful ghost. Marcus started, then recovered with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just communing with the mosquitoes. They're excellent listeners. Very non-judgmental." Elena sat down beside him without asking permission. She was wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked like someone who had stopped trying to impress people a long time ago and somehow became more impressive because of it. "I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that your daughter got into Stanford," she said. "That's incredible." "It is," Marcus agreed. "Incredible. Amazing. Wonderful. I'm thrilled." Each adjective sounded more hollow than the last. Elena studied him for a long moment. Most people accepted his performance at face value. Most people didn't look past the smile and the handsome face. But Elena tilted her head and said, "You're terrified, aren't you?" Marcus's carefully constructed expression faltered. "I don't know what you mean." "I raised 2 kids," Elena said softly. They're both adults now, living their own lives on the other side of the country. I remember exactly what it felt like when they left. Like someone was removing my organs with a dull spoon. Marcus let out a laugh that was more of a breath. That's graphic. I'm a retired surgeon. We're allowed to be graphic. A surgeon? Seriously? 30 years of cardiothoracic surgery. Hearts were my specialty. She smiled, and there was something sad in it. Ironic, really, given how badly I managed to break my own. And just like that, they were no longer neighbors making small talk. They were two people who recognized something broken in each other, something that maybe only another broken person could understand. If you're feeling this connection between them, if you're already rooting for them to find their way to each other, drop a comment right now telling me what you think is going to happen next. Because trust me, you're not ready for what's coming. Over the following weeks, Marcus and Elena fell into a routine that neither of them planned and neither of them questioned. Morning coffee on her porch. Evening walks around the neighborhood. Long conversations that started with casual topics and somehow ended up in territory that Marcus hadn't explored with anyone in years. He learned that Elena had been married for 22 years to a man named Richard, who was handsome and successful and emotionally absent in ways that slowly wore her down to nothing. He told her he loved her every day, but she couldn't remember the last time he had actually seen her. They divorced 3 years ago, and even though it was the right decision, even though she knew she deserved more than a beautiful prison, there were still nights when she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. What's the alternative, though? Marcus asked one evening, as they sat on her back deck watching the sun set. Stay with someone who doesn't see you? That's not love. That's just two people sharing a mortgage. Spoken like someone who knows something about that, Elena observed. She looked at him then, really looked, taking in his handsome features and the pain hidden behind his easy smile. You know, when I first saw you, I thought you had everything figured out. Young, successful, gorgeous. I assumed your life was perfect. Marcus laughed bitterly. The pretty package is just wrapping paper. What's inside is a mess. Tell me about the mess. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then, surprising himself, he said, My wife left me for my best friend. On my daughter's birthday. While the cake was in the oven. I was 29 years old. I thought I had my whole life ahead of me, and instead, I had to figure out how to raise a daughter alone while my entire world fell apart. Elena's sharp inhale was the only response for several seconds. Then she reached over and took his hand. She didn't say anything. She didn't offer empty platitudes or useless advice. She just held on, her fingers warm and solid and real. And Marcus, who hadn't let anyone hold his hand in 6 years, let her. You know what the worst part was, he continued, and the words came pouring out like water from a dam he hadn't even realized he'd been building. It wasn't that she left. It wasn't even that she chose him. It was what she said. She said she never really loved me. That Sophie was a mistake. That our entire marriage was just her trying to convince herself she could be normal. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I spent 6 years wondering what was wrong with me. What I did. What I could have done differently. And then I realized it didn't matter. Because the problem was never me. The problem was that I loved someone who didn't have the capacity to love me back. Elena squeezed his hand harder. There's nothing wrong with you, Marcus. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you raised a brilliant daughter by yourself. I know you stayed when it would have been easier to run. I know that you use humor to deflect because you're terrified of letting anyone see how much you're still hurting. She turned to face him fully. But here's the thing, I see it anyway. And I'm still here. Marcus stared at her. This woman who had appeared in his life out of nowhere, who had somehow seen through every defense he had, who was looking at him like he was worth seeing. He wanted to kiss her so badly it physically hurt. But he also knew that if he kissed her, there would be no going back. And he wasn't sure he was brave enough for what came next. So instead, he made a joke. "Careful, Dr. Thornton. I might start to think you actually like me. Though I should warn you, I'm a lot younger than you. I might not be mature enough for a sophisticated woman like yourself." Elena rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. And there's the deflection, right on schedule. Also, 10 years is nothing. I've seen couples with 20-year age gaps who are deliriously happy. Is that what we are? A couple? I don't know what we are yet. But I know I'm not going anywhere. You, she said, poking him in the chest, are many things. But predictable is not one of them. The summer unfolded in a haze of almost moments and near confessions. Sophie watched her father transform before her eyes, saw the way he laughed more easily, the way he hummed more easily, the way he hummed while making breakfast, the way he found excuses to be outside whenever Elena was in her garden. "You're in love with her," Sophie announced one afternoon. Marcus was loading the dishwasher and nearly dropped a plate. "I'm not, that's not, we're just friends." "Dad. Seriously. I'm going to Stanford, not Clown College. I have eyes. Being observant doesn't mean you're right." Sophie crossed her arms, looking so much like her mother that Marcus's heart ached for entirely different reasons. "So you're not in love with her?" Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then, very softly, he said, "I don't know how to do this, Sophie. I don't know how to let someone in again. What if I'm not enough? What if she leaves too? Dad, you're 35. You're young. You're successful. You're like stupidly handsome. And you have so much love to give. Mom didn't leave because of anything you did wrong. She left because she was broken in ways that had nothing to do with you." Sophie's expression softened. She walked over and hugged her father, and he held on like she was the only thing keeping him from drowning. "Dad," she said into his chest, "Mom leaving wasn't your fault. It wasn't about you not being enough. It was about her not being capable of recognizing what she had." She pulled back to look at him. "You deserve to be happy. You deserve someone who sees how amazing you are. And I'm pretty sure Elena is that person. When did you get so wise?" Marcus asked, his voice rough. "I learned from the best." Marcus kissed the top of her head. "I love you, kid. Love you too, old man. Now go tell Elena how you feel before I do it for you." But before Marcus could work up the courage to say anything, everything fell apart. It was August. Sophie's departure for Stanford was 3 weeks away. And Richard showed up. He arrived in a silver Mercedes, wearing a suit that cost more than Marcus's monthly mortgage payment, and he walked up to Elena's front door like he owned the place. Because apparently, in his mind, he still did. Marcus watched from his window as Elena answered the door, saw her body language shift from relaxed to rigid, saw her shake her head and try to close the door. He watched Richard put his hand on the door frame, leaning in, his charm as polished and predatory as a shark circling wounded prey. Every instinct told Marcus to go over there. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to intervene. But he also knew that Elena was a grown woman who had survived 30 years of this man. She didn't need Marcus to rescue her. She needed him to trust her to rescue herself. So he waited. And he watched. And when Elena finally got Richard to leave, when she closed the door and leaned against it with her eyes closed, Marcus sent her a text. "I'm here if you need anything. Even if that's just someone to sit in silence with." Her response came 3 minutes later. "Can you come over?" He was at her door before she could finish unlocking it. That night, Elena told him everything. Richard had come to win her back. He had shown up with flowers and apologies and promises to change, the same performance he had given a dozen times during their marriage. But this time, something was different. This time, Elena wasn't tempted. Not even for a second. You know why? She asked Marcus, as they sat on her couch with tea going cold in their hands. Why? Because of you. Marcus's heart stopped. Because, Elena continued, for the first time in my life, I know what it feels like to be actually seen. To be wanted for who I am, not who someone thinks I should be. To have conversations that mean something. To laugh until my stomach hurts at genuinely terrible jokes. Hey, my jokes are excellent. They're awful. But I love them anyway. She paused, looking at him with an expression that made his pulse race. You know what else I love? What? The way you look at me. Like age is just a number. Like the 10 years between us don't matter at all. They don't, Marcus said instantly. Elena, you're the most beautiful, intelligent, captivating woman I've ever met. The fact that you're 45 and I'm 35 is completely irrelevant. Most people would find it strange. Most people are idiots. She laughed, and the word hung in the air. Love. Neither of them acknowledged it directly, but it was there, pulsing between them like a living thing. Elena, Marcus started. Don't, she interrupted. Don't make a joke. Don't deflect. Just, stay here in this moment with me. Please. So he did. He stayed. And for the first time in 6 years, he didn't run. What happened next changed everything. Are you still with me? If this story is hitting you in the feels, if you're sitting there on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now and keep watching because the next part is going to break your heart before it puts it back together. Sophie left for Stanford on a bright September morning. Marcus helped her carry boxes into her dorm room, made inappropriate jokes about her roommate's poster collection, and managed to hold himself together until the exact moment when it was time to say goodbye. I'm so proud of you, he said, his voice cracking despite his best efforts. You're going to change the world. Dad, Sophie whispered, tears streaming down her face, I'm going to miss you so much. Hey, none of that. We have video calls and texting and I'm only a plane ride away. This isn't goodbye. This is just, see you later. Promise you'll be okay? Marcus thought about Elena waiting for him back home. He thought about the conversations they still needed to have, the feelings he still needed to confess, the terrifying, wonderful possibility of starting over at 35. I promise, he said. And for the first time, he actually believed it. The drive home was the longest 3 hours of his life. The house was so quiet when he walked in that he could hear his own heartbeat. He stood in Sophie's empty room for 20 minutes, touching the posters she had left behind, breathing in the faint scent of her shampoo that still lingered on the pillows. Then he walked to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of whiskey, and sat down at the table. He pulled out Sophie's acceptance letter, the one he had kept in his wallet since the day it arrived, and he read it again. And again. And then he started crying. He cried for Sophie, who had grown up so fast. He cried for the years he had spent alone, building walls instead of bridges. He cried for Rebecca, not because he missed her, but because he had wasted so much time being angry at someone who was never worth his anger. And he cried for himself, for the man he had been and the man he was becoming and the terrifying leap of faith that was waiting for him next door. He didn't remember making the decision to go to Elena's house. He didn't remember knocking on her door. He didn't remember the words that came pouring out of him, raw and unfiltered and completely devoid of the humor he usually hid behind. But he remembered her face. He remembered the way she listened without interrupting. He remembered the way she held him when the words finally ran out, and he remembered the exact moment when holding turned to something else, when comfort became desire, when 6 years of loneliness collided with the overwhelming need to feel alive. And then everything went dark. He woke up in her bed, with no memory of how he got there, wearing nothing but his boxers, with Elena curled against his back in his shirt, whispering that he was wild. Okay, Marcus said slowly, very carefully extracting himself from her arms and sitting up. I need you to explain what happened last night. Slowly. Using small words. Because my brain is not currently functioning at full capacity. Elena stretched like a cat in sunshine, completely unbothered by his obvious panic. What do you remember? I remember coming over. I remember talking. I remember crying, which is embarrassing. And then it's just blank. Elena laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound Marcus had ever heard. You didn't do anything scandalous, if that's what you're worried about. Well, nothing too scandalous. Define, too. She sat up, and the way his shirt slipped off one shoulder was extremely distracting. You told me you loved me. You told me you were terrified of loving me because you didn't think you could survive losing someone again. You told me that the age difference didn't matter, that I was the most incredible woman you'd ever known. And then you kissed me like the world was ending. Marcus's face went through approximately 15 expressions in 3 seconds. I said what? You told me you loved me. Out loud? With my mouth? Words that came from my actual brain? It was very romantic, actually. Right up until the moment when you passed out. I passed out? Emotional exhaustion, probably, combined with the whiskey you'd been drinking before you came over. Don't worry, she added, seeing his horror, nothing happened that you would regret. We kissed, you confessed your undying love, you fell asleep in my arms, and I stole your shirt because it smelled like you. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then, very quietly, he asked, and did you say anything back? When I told you I loved you? Elena's playful expression softened into something vulnerable and real. I said that I loved you too, Marcus. I said that I had loved you since that first night on your porch, when you were pretending to be okay and I could see that you weren't. I said that you were the first person in years who made me feel like myself. And I said that I was terrified too, but that I was done letting fear make my decisions. And the age thing? I told you that you were an old soul and I was young at heart, so we met somewhere in the middle. Marcus laughed, and it felt different somehow. Lighter. Like a weight he had been carrying for 6 years had finally been set down. So what happens now? He asked. Now, Elena said, crawling across the bed to cup his face in her hands, we figure it out. Together. One day at a time. That sounds terrifyingly healthy and mature. I know. Horrifying, right? Marcus laughed, and it felt different somehow. Lighter. Like a weight he had been carrying for 6 years had finally been set down. For the record, he said, I meant it. What I said last night. Even if I don't remember saying it. I know you did. And I'm probably going to say it again. A lot. Possibly at inappropriate times. I'm counting on it. And then he kissed her, and this time he was fully present for every second of it. But just when you think the story is over, just when you think they're going to ride off into the sunset together, fate had other plans. And the next challenge they faced would test everything they had built. Sophie came home for Thanksgiving with a secret. Marcus could tell the moment she walked through the door. She was smiling too brightly, talking too fast, and she kept avoiding eye contact with the practiced skill of someone who had something to hide. Spill, he said, 3 hours into her visit. Whatever it is, just tell me. Sophie's face crumpled. And then she told him everything. She wasn't doing well at Stanford. The coursework was overwhelming. She had developed severe anxiety that made it hard to leave her dorm room. She had failed 2 midterms and was on academic probation. And she had been lying to him for months because she didn't want to disappoint the one person who had always believed in her. Marcus's heart shattered. Not because of the grades, not because of the probation, but because his daughter had been suffering alone, terrified to tell him the truth. Sophie, he said, his voice breaking, you could never disappoint me. Ever. You could flunk out of every school in the country and I would still think you were the most incredible person I've ever known. But I'm supposed to be smart. I'm supposed to be successful. That's what everyone expects. Who cares what everyone expects? You're not a machine. You're a human being. You're allowed to struggle. You're allowed to fail. That's how you learn and grow and become who you're meant to be. What if who I'm meant to be isn't who everyone wants me to be? And there it was. The question that was really behind all of this. Sophie wasn't afraid of failing. She was afraid of not living up to a version of herself that others had created. Marcus pulled his daughter into his arms and held her while she cried. "Listen to me," he said. "You are not defined by your grades or your school or your career. You are defined by your kindness, your courage, your determination, and your heart. And those things, Sophie, those things are extraordinary." Elena found them like that an hour later, both of them red-eyed and exhausted but somehow closer than they had ever been. She didn't ask questions. She just made tea and sat with them and quietly became part of the family that was forming in that kitchen. Sophie looked at Elena, then at her father, then back at Elena. "So you two are finally official, huh?" Marcus and Elena exchanged glances. "Apparently I confessed my love while slightly intoxicated and then passed out before we could discuss logistics," Marcus said. Sophie burst out laughing for the first time in months. "That is the most dad thing I have ever heard. I have a brand. I'm committed to it." "He's absolutely ridiculous," Elena said, but she was smiling in a way that made it sound like a compliment. "So you don't think it's weird?" Elena asked Sophie carefully. "The age difference? Me being older than your dad?" Sophie looked at her father, saw the way he looked at Elena, saw the light in his eyes that hadn't been there for years. "Elena, my dad has been alone for 6 years. He's been pretending to be okay while falling apart inside. And you're the first person who's made him actually happy. I don't care if you're 10 years older or 20 years older. I care that you love him and he loves you." "Welcome to the family," Sophie told her. "Fair warning, we're a mess. The best families are." The months that followed were not easy. Sophie took a leave of absence from Stanford and came home to get help for her anxiety. There were therapy appointments and medication adjustments and days when she couldn't get out of bed. There were also breakthroughs and small victories and moments of genuine joy. Marcus and Elena navigated the complexities of blending their lives together, of learning each other's quirks and boundaries and unhealed wounds. They fought sometimes, because they were both stubborn and opinionated and used to doing things their own way. But they always came back to each other. They always talked it through. They always remembered that love isn't about being perfect, it's about choosing each other again and again, even when it's hard. If you've ever loved someone who pushed you to be better, if you've ever been afraid to let someone see the real you, if you've ever taken a leap of faith even when you weren't sure you'd land safely, drop a heart in the comments. Let me know this story is connecting with you, because we're almost at the end, and it's a moment you won't want to miss. 1 year after that confusing Sunday morning when Marcus woke up in Elena's bed, he found himself standing in his backyard on a crisp autumn evening. Sophie was home, healthy and happy, working as a research assistant at a local lab while she figured out her next steps. Elena was beside him, her long silky hair catching the last rays of sunset, looking at him with a question in her eyes. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'm thinking about how a year ago, I was convinced that the best parts of my life were behind me. I was 34, alone, raising a daughter by myself, and terrified that I would never feel whole again. I thought that love was something that happened to other people, that I had already used up my chances, that I was too broken to be worth choosing. And now? And now I'm 35, and I know that I was wrong about everything. Because you chose me, Elena. Not the version of me that's funny and charming and keeps everyone at arm's length. You chose the version that's scared and imperfect and still figuring it out. And that." He had to stop, swallow past the lump in his throat. "That's the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. Elena's eyes were shining with tears. Marcus. Wait. Let me finish. Because I need to say this, and if I don't do it now, I'm going to make a joke and ruin the moment. She laughed through her tears. Okay. Finish. Marcus took her hands in his. I love you. I love your kindness and your strength and your terrible taste in crime documentaries. I love the way you make tea when things are hard and the way you laugh at my awful jokes even though you know they're awful. I love that you saw through every wall I built and you stayed anyway. I love that you gave me the courage to believe that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late for me to have the life I thought I'd lost. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Elena Thornton, I know there's an age gap between us. I know some people might not understand. But I also know that every morning when I wake up next to you, I feel like the luckiest man in the world. And I want to feel that way for the rest of my life. He opened the box. Inside was a simple diamond ring, elegant and timeless, just like her. Will you marry me? The word, yes, had barely left her lips before he was kissing her, the ring forgotten in his hand, everything forgotten except this moment, this woman, this second chance that he had almost been too afraid to take. Sophie watched from the kitchen window, tears streaming down her face, and texted her friends a picture she had secretly taken of the whole thing. My dad just proposed to his neighbor, she typed. She's 10 years older than him and they're disgustingly in love. It's the most romantic thing I've ever seen. I'm never going to stop giving him grief about it. The wedding was small. Just family and close friends, gathered in Elena's backyard on a perfect spring day. Marcus wore a suit and managed not to make a single joke during the ceremony. Elena wore a simple white dress that made her look like she was glowing from within. And Sophie gave a toast that made everyone cry, including the woman who had once abandoned her. Because Rebecca showed up. She had heard about the wedding through mutual friends and had reached out to Sophie, asking if she could come. Marcus wanted to say no. Every protective instinct he had screamed at him to keep this woman who had hurt them so badly far away from their happiness. But Sophie asked him to let her come. Not for her, Sophie explained. For me. I need to close that chapter. I need to look at her and know that I'm okay, that we're okay, that she doesn't have power over us anymore. So Marcus agreed. And when Rebecca walked into that backyard, when she saw the life he had built without her, the family he had created, the love he had found, something in her face crumbled. She looked at Marcus, still handsome at 35, happier than she had ever seen him. She looked at Elena, beautiful and confident and absolutely secure in her place by his side. And she realized what she had thrown away. She didn't stay long. She congratulated them, hugged Sophie stiffly, and left before the cake was cut. But as she walked away, Marcus felt the last piece of anger he had been carrying dissolve. Not because he forgave her. Not because what she did was okay. But because he realized that she didn't matter anymore. She was just a person who had once been part of his story, a chapter that was closed, a lesson that had led him here. And here was pretty wonderful. On the night of his wedding, Marcus stood on the porch of the house that had felt so empty a year ago and looked out at the life he had somehow stumbled into. His daughter was inside, dancing with Elena's adult children, who had flown in from across the country and had immediately adopted Sophie as their little sister. His new wife was in the kitchen, sneaking extra frosting from the cake and laughing with his sister, who had finally stopped trying to set him up with her co-workers. And he was here, breathing in the night air, feeling something he almost didn't recognize. Peace. Elena came out to find him, sliding her arm through his and resting her head on his shoulder. You okay? She asked. Better than okay. I'm happy. Actually, genuinely, terrifyingly happy. That's allowed, you know. To be happy. I'm starting to figure that out. He kissed the top of her head. Thank you. For what? For knocking on my door that night. For seeing through my nonsense. For not letting me push you away. For not caring that I'm younger than you. 10 years is nothing, she said. Besides, you're an old soul. You were always older than your years. And you're ageless. You'll be beautiful when you're 90. You'll be 75 when I'm 90. And I'll still be crazy about you. Elena laughed. Be here. Be present. Be my husband. That I can do. They stood there for a long time, two people who had almost given up on love, who had almost let fear win, who had somehow found their way to each other anyway. And that, right there, is the message I want you to take from this story. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter what the age gap is. It doesn't matter how many times you've been hurt. It doesn't matter how convinced you are that love is for other people, that happiness is something you don't deserve, that the best parts of your life are already behind you. It's not too late. It's never too late. The right person is out there, waiting for you to be brave enough to let them in. The life you want is waiting for you to stop making excuses and start making changes. The love you deserve is waiting for you to believe that you deserve it. Marcus Rivera was 35 when he fell in love for the second time. Elena Thornton was 45 when she decided to take a chance on the younger man next door who made her laugh and saw her soul. And together, they built something beautiful out of the broken pieces they had both been carrying. Your story isn't over. Your second act is just beginning. And I promise you, the best is yet to come. Now, if this story touched your heart, if it made you believe even a little bit that love and second chances are real, I have just one request. Hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Not for me, but for the algorithm that helps stories like this reach people who need to hear them. Someone out there is feeling alone right now, feeling like it's too late for them, feeling like happiness is something that happens to other people. Maybe this story will find them. Maybe it will be the reminder they need that their story isn't over either. And one more thing before you go. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to know what country you're in, what corner of the world this story has reached. Because love is universal. Hope is universal. The desire to connect, to be seen, to find our person, that's something that crosses every border and bridges every difference. So tell me, where are you watching from today? Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching until the end. And remember, it's never too late to let someone in. I'll see you in the next story.